lunch. We kept trying, but we could never find a date that both of us were on. So when this came up, I thought the perfect solution is to have him as a guest at the Rotary meeting. And that's what he agreed to, but he prefers to do it on Zoom. So Abbas, you may go as a native man. He came here and then went to the Texas A&M University where he got an engineering degree. Lived in a couple of places in the U.S. prior to coming to Colorado. Got here, got into the real estate business, made millions, and I started traveling around the world spending it. So much. We will look forward to your presentation.
Can you hear me? Okay, all right, thank you. Well, then I go on. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you today. In the words of Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli anthropologist and author, the whole of humankind now constitute of a single civilization with all people sharing a common challenges and opportunities. Yet, in our amazing country, we deal with racial issues. I will have to admit and ask you to consider that this is a subject that is the most difficult and challenging to talk about. Most of us avoid the uncomfortable discussion on the issue unless a tragedy strikes and moves the nation and the world in a great anguish, like it has happened recently. When my friends and family and Rotary Club members talked about what they had observed in the media and how sick they felt in the last month or so, and how painful their experience has been, I asked them to consider in a constructive way, not to put them on a spot, but I asked them, what are you going to do about it? And my question to your club, to my club, to the whole of Rotary and my friend has been, what are you going to do about it? And today, you can start thinking about this difficult issue, and you perhaps have been thinking, but it is up to us if it's going to happen. So a group of Rotarians in my club started thinking, and in no time, we developed an ad hoc study group, and in no time, it became 27 people, scholars, architects, engineers, people from all walks of life, Rotarians. We developed a vision. Our vision is to make the Denver Southeast a model of diversity, an organization of cultural awareness and responsiveness. And our mission is to implement this vision by seeking and initiating specific practices and actions that address and eradicate systematic racism in our community while increasing understanding and respect for one another. And then we developed some objectives. Our objectives are to implement the values of four-way test, to inform ourselves and others through studying the realities of systematic racism and replicate this course of a study in other clubs and in our community, to understand oneself, the group, and the relationship to others, integrating views and values, to foster a space that is welcoming to communities of color, to expand membership to people of color, to help and participate in communities of color through direct community involvement, shared community projects, and community engagement to support one another in carrying out anti-racist education, practices, and progress, to determine a commitment to and love of humanity. Let us make the world a better place based on goodwill, respect, humility, and love for all. In the words of Persian poet Saadi, and this poem is inscribed at the entrance of the United Nations, human beings are members of a whole in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas.
All right, Mr. Abbas, make sure I turn this one up. Mr. Abbas, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. What's really great about this, not only has their club really kind of taking this on their own, but he's also a past district governor. I didn't announce that. I probably should have. He has been a big-time Rotarian for a long time, and we're so thankful. We're so thankful for your time and your leadership in this area. And it's perfect. I want to go ahead and segue from a club level to the district level. Regina Edmondson, our very own assistant district governor, is in the house, and she's also our chair. And I'm going to butcher the title, so if you don't mind sharing with the title of what you're chairing, and then she's going to present on the district level. And then we're going to go right into Mr. Omar Montgomery to kind of talk about it from a very tangible perspective, from the NAACP perspective, and kind of how race and diversity and what we're dealing with right now, and what we've always been dealing with, but really kind of what's highlighted right now. Here you go, Regina.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I was, earlier in the year, I was appointed by our immediate past district governor, Kurt Harris, to be the chair of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the district. And what that entails is creating and overseeing a committee that includes an outreach committee. That the goal is to look at areas where Rotary is not represented and where Rotary does not represent the community that it serves. Look at where membership, we have a decrease, 5% decrease in membership or 14% decrease in retention. So the goal also is to look at why are people not coming back to Rotary or when they visit. So look at where is there space and opportunity to include people of color. So we will provide resources that includes training, that includes resources of speakers, information around diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you are interested in being on the committee, you can send me an email. You'll receive an email back with a few questions asking about background. You do not have to have experience in DEI work, but it's just something so that we know who the committee is made up of. The committee includes both Rotarians and people from the community. I think that kind of sums up what we're working on. I had the opportunity to visit Abbas meeting this past Monday, and I can't speak highly enough of the work that they are doing and the initiative that they took on a club level. And they are just so far ahead of even where we are as a district in terms of the work that they're doing. Abbas is also a part of our, newly has agreed to be a part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee for the district. And so I appreciate that and look forward to working with him in that capacity.
Thank you very much, Regina. Come on now. Wow, to take on that role for our district is awesome, and we kind of have a little bit of pride, right? Aurora Rotary Club has got somebody kind of really leading the charge from a district level. It's pretty cool. And then on top of all this, we have the guy that the Denver metro area has been calling upon to really kind of talk about this. He's a member of our club. If you guys don't know this, I know Omar's been very, very busy, and we're so honored that he has come to speak today on this topic. So come on up, Mr. Montgomery. Thank you very much, sir. You're sitting right here, just so people can see you. Thanks, buddy.
He's taken away my natural ability to speak because I like to roam around, walk around, and I got to stand here so that the great people on Zoom can enjoy the presentation. First of all, my name is Omar Montgomery. I am president of the Aurora branch of the NAACP and also a proud member of the Aurora Rotary Club. So I enjoy being able to come here, especially now that I'm back to work. I can't come as much, but when I'm able to go to events. And by the way, there's this guy I know, he was running for mayor. I don't remember his name. He was running for mayor of Aurora, and actually a conversation I had during the blizzard at a Rotary meeting, we were able to talk about some great issues. So just thank you for all of your support and the work you've been doing. I also want to thank my better half, Regina, and I also want to thank Abbas and Bill. We went up to Abbas' house, had a great conversation about some of these issues. And now it's sort of set the stage for my presentation right here today. If you noticed on the news, there's been a lot of talk about race, a lot of talk about the police, seeing communities fighting. One of the things that really hurt me just last week was up in Fort Collins. We had two groups. Both probably have valid issues, yelling and screaming at each other, but ended up in a physical altercation. And it makes me wonder, where are we going wrong with the discussion to the point where issues that we all care about are now dividing us in ways that's probably been there, but now it's more apparent, more physical, even to the point now where people can't even sit in the same room without just having a critical discussion about these issues. So I'm gonna share a little bit about me, my story, my background, and then dive into things that we can do right here today. You know, when I think about our four tests, you know, one of the things it says, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Think about that. Goodwill and better friendships. So this guy right here used to have hair. I used to have a lot of hair. Actually, I used to have an afro. I used to have my hair slicked down, you name it. I just never had a jerry curl. For those who know what that is, that just didn't happen. But when I was growing up, I thought I did everything this country has asked me to do. I've never been arrested, but I was stopped many times. One of the stops that's most memorable was I graduated from college. And I don't know about y'all, for those that either graduated from high school or from college, that is like the fun day. Why? Your parents spoil you with food, but when you graduate from college, they actually plot and kick you out. But for that one day, you are able to celebrate. I graduated with 2 degrees, a Black Studies degree as well as a criminal justice degree, and just got accepted into my master's program. So on that day, I was riding high. I was excited. And this was in Los Angeles, California. So I'm driving home with my best friend in the car, and we see a police car coming in the opposite direction with an island separating us. We locked eyes. And I said, you know what? We're going to get stopped. He said, I know. So we pull up in front of my mother's house, and the car is behind us. Now, we've been stopped so many times that we're actually joking. When I say joking, we're sitting in the car like, oh man, I wonder what we got stopped for now. We're literally joking. Then I said, what's taking them so long to come to the car? And I look in the rearview mirror, and I said, oh dude, they got their guns out. He said, you joking? I said, I'm serious, they got their guns out. He said, what do we do? I said, I have no idea. And so when I get out the car, I must say I didn't use the best language. I must say I was extremely agitated. I must say I was extremely upset, and so was my best friend. And then when my mother came outside and said, hey, you know how moms are. If anybody know a mom that defends their kid, she's like, them some good kids. What are you doing? Well, why are you stopping them? What's going on? He told my mom to shut up and go in the house. Now, mind you, I have a gun pointed at me, center mass, and I lose it for about 5 seconds. And I say, if you ever talk to my mom like that again, you and I are gonna have a problem. Now, there was a problem with that statement I said too. I'm big. This guy was big. He was like 6'5", 300 pounds, and he was all solid muscle. And I was thinking to myself, I just challenged this dude to a fight. Now, I know I got maybe a few hand skills. It may not work in my direction, but you never tell my mother to shut up. And I asked him, I said, why did you stop me, sir? He said, your muffler was low. And he said, in this neighborhood, I got to protect myself from people like you. And then he left and said, we're going to act like nothing has happened. Have a nice day. Oh, your mom said you graduated from college. Congratulations. I don't remember the fact that I was one of the speakers at my graduation. I don't remember the fact that I was able to see my friends and talk about our future. That is the sticking point of the day I graduated from college. And then let's fast forward. And we hear this time and time again, this term Black Lives Matter. And some people get it confused and they say, well, you know, why are we just talking about one group? We're talking about a group who feel like they have been traumatized by incidents like this. And when you feel and hear that trauma, that's why they say our lives must not matter. So we must explicitly say hashtag Black Lives Matter, meaning only in the case of police abuse and power. When you separate the three words, Black Lives Matter, now you're talking about the general inequities that impact Black America. Two different words. Hashtag Black Lives Matter, police abuse. Black Lives Matter are the general inequities that has existed in this country that people are protesting about today. But we've seen where the protest has gone. As a matter of fact, the protests are not just Black people. For those who've been watching the protests, there are a diverse group of people who said enough is enough, and we all must come together and have a voice and begin to resolve these issues. The downfall is that people are talking at each other and not with each other. They're yelling and screaming at each other, threatening each other. But no one is sitting down trying to figure out how the problem is solved. So I decided to do something extremely courageous in my career, teach middle school. It was probably the most courageous job I ever had. And I've had some, I've worked with gang members, this, that, and the other. The most courageous job I ever had was teaching middle school. And anybody remember the DARE program? The DARE program? Well, my kids were very past the DARE program. They probably could have given instructions on what to do, when to do, and where to do it. But we had the police officer come and do the DARE presentation. And when he came, I introduced myself and I said, here's the class. I gave the class instructions. And after the class, he said, do you want to go to lunch? You want to go to lunch with me? He said, yeah, let's go to lunch. I just want to sit down and talk to you about your job. I'm thinking, where do I sit in his car? I'm not sitting in the back. And if I sit in the front, my students will think I'm a snitch. And he saw the hesitation, because by then I'm bald. I've been bald since my second year in college. And so he see the sweat coming down my head, and he's like, just relax. We just gonna go around to this taco stand. I started to see your hesitation, all good. This is immediately after several incidences in Los Angeles. One, the LA riots, and two, the O.J. Simpson case. So tensions were high in Los Angeles. And we went to lunch and we didn't agree on nothing. As a matter of fact, we liked each other so much that we kept going all 5 days he was there, not to agree on nothing, but to respect each other and hear each other out. And at our last lunch, he said, you know, I learned a lot from you. And he said, I hope you learned something from me. And he said, as a matter of fact, I hope that you have a different perception of law enforcement because I know your experience with law enforcement started when you were 11 years old, the first time you were stopped. And I said, well, I hope that you learn from me that not everyone in my community is anti-law enforcement. They're anti-issues of where police abuse is not addressed and people are not held accountable. And he said, I get that. And he said, in this conversation, you've made me a better police officer. I said, well, in this conversation, you have opened my eyes up to things I didn't think about related to law enforcement. And I began to think, how do we reconcile? How do we model what took place at a taco stand where two people didn't agree? The food was good, though. How are we able to get to that point today? To where maybe we can use our 4 questions that we ask to figure out, is this something that Rotary should get into? Maybe we should just bring that on the human level and begin to bring people together and figure out, how do we build goodwill in the city of Aurora, where now we are the focus point nationally for issues that's been plaguing our society for a while. How did Aurora become the focus point? But more importantly, how do we begin to address it? How do we get community members that are upset to sit down with our law enforcement and say, here are the things that we're upset about, and then simultaneously our law enforcement listen and begin to share their stories too, because you know what? They're human beings, and they take the badge and shield off. They go home, they have kids, they have wives, they want a safe city as well, and they want to be treated fairly. So the question becomes, how do we get in the room and begin to hash out these problems? Because if we don't, there's a few trends that we need to address, and I'll begin to close. Our crime rate has gone up. Violent crime has gone up. People have lost trust in our law enforcement community, so they are trying to solve crimes themselves. Can you imagine someone that believed that when they look at law and order, it actually is solved in an hour? Or they, you know, the old school Perry Mason movies or Ironside, for those who used to watch these shows, that things are solved like this, and I'm gonna use what I learned on TV to be my own detective? No, we need to have trust in the people that are trained for this, and at the same time, we need our people that are trained to understand what the community needs. That's what the NAACP is committed to. That's why it is important that the NAACP also partner with Rotary. Why? Let's bring these two communities together to have an awesome dialogue about how together, how we can move the city forward. I think that's something we can do. I think if we go off these 4 tests and we sat together and based it on these 4 tests, not only could the NAACP Rotary combined can do it, our city can do it as well. So I want to say thank you for taking time to listen to my presentation. I look forward to working with you, not just as a Rotarian, but also as president of the Aurora branch of the NAACP. Thank you.
All right, I want to go open up for questions. We have about 15 minutes.
And so I know this is definitely a topic that there's going to be questions from the crowd and online. If you have a question on Zoom, please type it in the chat and David will share it with us, okay? That way we can get it answered. On behalf of the entire club, we're so grateful for you taking the time. We know you're super busy right now with everything going on, and I'm grateful, absolutely. And so go ahead, in the room, go ahead and raise your hand. Mr. Wagner. Okay, yes, sir.
Is there yet or I'm assuming there has been a study group of some kind formed on this issue? With representatives from the city, from the police department, from the NAACP. What has started?
And I'm gonna repeat the question. The question is, has there been a group formed within the city, partnership with the NAACP, with citizens and different elected officials, and what has happened from that? So if you want to go ahead and answer that.
I would say, in the practical sense, Aurora has done a decent job in some of these areas. Let's take the fact that we're establishing an independent review board that is based on some of the data that has taken place in regards to police accountability. The police chief has made a lot of different reforms that she hoped will not only retain police officers, but build trust in the community. Also, there's been several community meetings, town hall meetings, to where the community is able to express what they want and what they want to see in the police department. A lot of things actually has been done. And I'm proud to say there's several different investigations that's going on into the Elijah McClain case, the family that was stopped, that was put on the concrete, as well as things that we need to address in regards to the quality of life of police officers. Insurance plans, and making sure that they have the resources they need to be safe while doing peacekeeping in our city. So with that stated, the things is that these things are not happening fast enough, and people are a little impatient. So the data has been there, the infrastructure is there. We as a community has to be a little patient, and we have to make sure we minimize as many mistakes as possible. But since the bullseye is on the city of Aurora, any little mistake is going to blow up. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it sounds like there's multiple committees.
Yes.
Is there one lead group that the mayor has denominated as, we want this group leading this effort or anything like that?
I think the lead organization would be the, I think it's the Public Safety Committee within the city that's made up of council members. They're the ones that sort of driving a lot of the issues and efforts and things of this nature. I know Congressman Crow has been saying from a federal level, he wants to bring resources, as well as Phil Weiser from a state attorney general level wants to bring resources. But you bring up a very critical issue. How do we begin to organize these pieces in a way to where the community can be educated on what each of these are doing, what's their responsibilities, and what's the expected outcomes? That has not been done, but I think the city is working towards it based on some recent conversations I've had.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Craig. Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Any other questions? Mr. Phil Gibson, repeat it real loud, and I'm going to repeat it for Zoom.
Hey, Omar, how much of the activities from the police, a lot of history of policing, and I'm no expert, but based on what I've read, a lot of back in the 50s, it seemed like policing started to change where they were dealing with many more social issues versus criminal. And so how much of that do you think has impacted what's going on today? Whereas if they, and how do you, and the second part of that question is, how do you address this impatience that's going on, everybody in society? Because to your point, this has been going on before you were alive and through your entire lifetime, it sounds like. It's not going to get fixed tomorrow. So how do you get people to be more patient and see these steps through?
So the question for Zoom is, I'm going to do the second part first, is how do we help with the patience level of our community. How do we address that? What can we do to partner there? And then the first part is, and I think I understood the question, is really what percent is peacekeeping? What percent is really law enforcement? Is that really what the crux of the question was?
Yeah, actually, so
Yeah.
Part of it is for police and social workers.
Yeah.
To address things versus things that are true.
Great question.
You bring up an excellent time period, the 50s. The 50s, late 50s, we began to talk about a culture change in America. I wasn't born, I'm just going by my academics now. For those of you that were there probably can vouch for some of this. The Vietnam War was very pivotal in regards to what law enforcement looked like today. When you look at what took place at Kent University, that was the first time a law enforcement agency actually fired upon protests outside of the civil rights movement and things of this nature. So when you begin to look at where you begin to see that tension, it begins to start in the late 50s and the 60s. In the African American community, it goes long before that, because after the Emancipation Proclamation, one of the other industries of labor was the prison industry. And so African Americans were arrested for all sorts of reasons in order to keep free labor going through the prison industry. Let's fast forward to today to get to your question. We have to begin to figure out, one, part of reconciliation is acknowledgement. Law enforcement nationwide have to acknowledge we have a problem. They have to acknowledge it. Part of the problem is that some people double down and say, we've never had a problem. I like the way it was. I don't care about the inequities. I don't care about the data. And that tension still keeps going. One, we have to have acknowledgement. Then the community has to acknowledge that there are problems that they need law enforcement help with. And then if we're able to at least just get to those two places, we can begin to deal with those social issues. One thing the city of Aurora has done well is putting the social workers in the car. I would like to see what they're doing in, I think it was either Portland or Seattle, although they got some challenges themselves. What they do is they not only have a social worker and a police officer, they also have like an RN or a nurse. So just in case there's a medical issue, if there's a mental health issue, the law enforcement person is actually the last one to show up unless there's a danger for any of those two, or all three of them are in the car together. So if we're able to have systems like that and take that, and take those things out of law enforcement hands, because now you're asking a law enforcement officer to be a psychologist, a social worker, and a peacekeeper. And that's not what they're trained to do. They're trained to de-escalate, but they're not trained to read the signs of mental health only just to a certain limit. Let's get those trained people in there. Let's have that cohort of people in the car with the law enforcement officer, or have triage set up for those individuals that need not to be arrested, but need to have treatment and support. And I think we can get a lot done. And patients, we got to stay off Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but part of it is the culture today. I remember when I was growing up, I had a rotary phone. And if you called someone, the line was busy, you had to wait until they call you back. Now someone texts you, and if they don't text you back in 5 minutes, you think they're mad at you. That's our culture today. So the question becomes, you can't be impatient with the issues that we're dealing with now, but we have to acknowledge nationwide and locally, we have a problem. Here are the things that we're doing to fix the problem, educate the community, get their input, and let them know what the time period is going to be for all these things to manifest.
That's great. Any other questions in the room? Yes, Mr. Suss.
I want to thank you for your leadership in the community. Obviously, those of us who've been around the world for a long time know that we have suffered from our what people thought of us. We need leadership like yours to keep us going in the right direction. Secondly, I wanted to offer something I saw on a marquee in the on a church on Colorado Boulevard. It said, "All lives can't matter till Black Lives Matter." That puts it all in perspective. All lives can't matter until.
That's absolutely right, Mr. Sass. For the Zoom people, Mr. Sass said on a marquee, it said all lives can't matter until Black lives matters. Did I say that correctly? I'll make sure I repeat it. And that's where I think people are just so lost and they get so like divisive, is that they don't understand that the Black community has been so, the injustice and the equality has not been there. I mean, talking about 11 years old, I don't know about you, my 11-year-old, 12-year-old, never been pulled over, never been bothered by the police. That is it's a real deal that we can't relate to because we didn't walk a mile in his shoes. So I think that's a great point, Mr. Sass. Any other questions in the room? Any on Zoom? Did you have any questions on Zoom? No question on Zoom? Ms. Sheila. So the question for everybody on Zoom is, what is Aurora doing with the school resource officers? There's the removal from the Denver school system. I think I'm saying that correct, right, Sheila? The school resource officers are being removed from the schools. What is Aurora doing? And I'd like to hear you.
Our school resource officers, I'm actually sitting on two committees. I sit on the accountability committee for Aurora Public Schools, and I'm currently sitting on a task force for Cherry Creek Public Schools, strictly on school resource officers. Let's look at the two sides of this. One side, hey, we need school resource officers to keep our kids protected. We saw what had happened at some schools in regards to the mass shootings. And for anybody who knows anything about mass shootings, response time, 30 seconds can mean about 4 or 5 lives in response time. So on one end, you want to make sure you have school resource officers there to protect kids, plus some of them are mentors. Some of them mentor the kids, help them do life changes and this, that, and the other. Then let's look at the other side of that coin. The other side of that coin, many of you probably heard the school to prison pipeline. School to prison pipelines sometimes are directly related to our school resource officers, where, I don't know when you was growing up, when I was growing up, if I got into a fight, I didn't worry about getting a citation or going to court. My parents just wanted to know if I won. Did you win? Does he look as bad as you right now? I mean, that's what, and so now things are criminalized in schools. So parents are deciding, depending on background statistics, African Americans make up more than half of the citations that are given in high schools in both those school districts, as well as suspensions and expulsions. Next would be our Latinx populations, and then from there our white populations, and it goes down. I think our Asian descent is the last group. And so these kids are getting criminal records. Now, it used to be when you turned 18, your record was automatically expunged. Not today. You have to pay for it and hope that the judge expunge your record. So parents are thinking, do I send my kid to learn algebra and possibly go to jail because of an incident that happens with a school resource officer? Those are the questions that they're asking. And that's why some people are saying, we do not want school resource officers in school because of the negative impact it's had on my child or my family. On the flip side, we also know we need to have a presence there to make sure that our kids are protected, because we know mental health is a real issue today with people bringing guns to school and for some reason taking it out on our most precious commodity, our kids. So we have to figure out, how do we have a balance? And it goes back to the question that I think that was stated by you in regards to taking the discipline out of the role of the SRO and the school taking the position of discipline, and the SRO should only interfere if a weapon is involved or someone's life is in danger. If those two things are not taking place, the SRO can just be there like a referee. Hey, y'all need to separate, listen to this person, and let the school deal with it. But it shouldn't be a criminal behavior unless it amounts to something where somebody's life is in danger, a weapon was involved, or mass drugs were involved.
That's fantastic. Omar knows this. I've had a lot of great opportunities to get to sit down with Omar. So my background is law enforcement. So I just think it's interesting to kind of see the perspective coming from Omar about school resource officers. And I cannot agree any more with him when it comes to school resource officers arresting and giving citations for something that should be handled by the dean of the school. There should be a police officer's responsibility to write this kid a ticket because he decided, the two of these knuckleheads decided, I say dudes, because and it's just as bad as ladies. I was in South Florida at Broward Sheriff's Office. I was a deputy on the road, and this is the same department that has a lot of problems, but I only did it part-time there. And man, I would go into a community and the ladies would fight, and it would be bad, but it wouldn't be, we as police didn't really deal with it. Mom and dad dealt with it in that community. And that was a good example of exactly what you're talking about. And the deans and the principals should be dealing with that in the schools, not the cop. And then the other thing about mental health, police officers, if they choose to do so, they go to a CIT class. You guys know about that crisis intervention team training? It was an 80-hour course back in 05 when I went. It's a long time ago now, guys. And today, they don't always make it mandatory for cops to go to that. But that is just a little bit of what you need to deal with somebody in crisis. Just a little bit of information. It's not a psychiatrist or a nurse or a counselor that's been trained to deal with that. So I just want to say, as we wrap up, I know what I like to do. So what I want to do is I want to do, if it's okay with Omar, he has a 5-10 minutes to stay after. And just, so I'm so grateful for you, for your time as always. Regina, thank you so much for leading this great cause on the district level as well as with our club. I thank you so much to Abbas and what he presented today. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajabi. I'm thinking I said that right. And